G'day and welcome to episode 79 of The Other Side Australia with Damian Coory, and this is number 2 of 3 summer series episodes we're doing for the next couple of weeks, in which we will be bringing you the best bits from all of our shows in 2021. Our summer series will run until December 22, next Wednesday, when episode 80 will be our final show for this year and our final show with Discernible. I will be taking off for 5 months to run my campaign and concentrate on that because it's very important for the Liberal Democrats for the Brisbane electorate of Ryan for the federal election. So I am having a crack at politics. I think you should have a crack at politics. If you're sitting out there wondering if you should have a crack at politics, if you're watching this show, I would most definitely say, if you agree with a lot of the things we say here, you should get into the game. Join the Liberal Democrats and get into it. I think we need more real people with real world experience in Canberra, and I don't think politics is a place for people to have a career. Sorry, but career politicians need to go find themselves something else to do with their lives as well as politics. I'll still be on social media a lot, by the way, during that whole period, so I'm not going away. There will still be content. It'll just be short clips of me, sprouting my views and showing you a little bit of the campaign every now and then. I'll do that and load it up on YouTube. I'll load it up on the Other Side Australia Facebook page, and I'll load it up on Instagram and also on my personal Facebook page, which is Damian Coory, DamianCoory. So jump on, follow me on Facebook, and you'll be able to keep in touch over that period. Then we'll let you know what's going to happen after that. Either I'm going to become a member of Parliament, in which case I'll still keep doing those updates for 3 years, or I will be not a member of Parliament and I will be back doing something in the video sphere. Maybe this show, maybe a different show, but we'll definitely be back somewhere. Basically because I can't shut up. So I've realised that after all these years that I've got to have a platform. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to be back in the public eye. So so that's what's happening. So do follow me on Facebook, please, and friend me there to keep in touch next year. Now, back in March, the tediously unfunny British news comedian John Oliver tried unsuccessfully to do a takedown of America's top-rating cable news TV host, Fox News' Tucker Carlson. So in true The Other Side style, I decided to do a takedown of John Oliver trying to take down Carlson. And this led to a whole segment on how the West was committing cultural and political suicide with identity politics and wokeism. Is it just me, or are American talk show hosts and news comedians like Stephen Colbert just becoming less and less funny? They're all at a loss for something to make cheap shots about now that Donald Trump's out of office.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Late Show. I'm your host, Stephen Colbert. I have a lovely sip of my coffee right here, get all zipped up. There you go. Sound loves that, right? Doesn't the sound guys love that?
Hilarious stuff, the zipper. That's, just, wow. I suppose it's better than the same Trump joke he's been telling for the last 5 years. Anyway, they're witty, oh-so-cool gags putting down conservatives and conservative values, making inner-city elites feel like they're still the cool, smart kids, while insulting the other half of the country, are just getting tedious. There's no more arrogant lefty and less funny of the crew than John Oliver. This week, Oliver decided to go after Fox News host Tucker Carlson, the highest-rating TV show host in the US. Why? Well, the piece went on and on and on, so I think Oliver might have a bit of an obsession. But generally, it was for being a conservative human with conservative values. In one part of the seemingly endless hatchet job, Oliver slammed Carlson for daring to speak out against US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a far-left Democrat darling and one of AOC's Gang of Four. A woman who seems to hate everything about the United States and Western civilization that helped make her who she is today.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
Wow, in under 30 seconds in that clip on Tucker Carlson's show, Ilhan Omar slams the profit motive, the very thing that makes capitalism and free market economies work so well and has lifted tens of millions of people out of poverty in the past 50 years. And she manages to weave in the classic Marxist rhetoric of bringing down the whole system of oppression. That's worthy of a bit of critique in my book. Tucker Carlson's reaction to Omar's comments back in 2020 is one that I couldn't agree with more.
Dismantle the American economy and the American system of government, institutions that generations of Americans built over hundreds of years.
Yep, sounds reasonable to me. Have some respect for the system and the people who came before you. But no, not according to John Oliver's British middle-class pseudo-socialist worldview. Here's his take on Tucker's criticism of Omar.
All right, there is already enough there in the sneering condescension that Ilhan Omar should be quietly grateful her entire life because she was granted asylum when she was a child.
Why would it be so hard to be grateful for your whole life for what a country that granted you and your family asylum did for you? Lots of immigrants are grateful when they move to a country with a freer, better system. My ancestors were. And they worked like dogs to give back. And how exactly is Omar oppressed by this system she so hates? It enabled her, an immigrant and a Muslim woman, to become a congresswoman. But that's just not okay in John Oliver's worldview.
Let's just consider the vast distance between what you just heard her say and what he seemed to hear. Because according to Tucker, dismantling the system of oppression means dismantling the entire American economy and system of government.
Right. So when she said she hates profit and wants to dismantle the system of oppression, we're supposed to believe that John Oliver, a British-educated lefty, someone who would definitely have studied Marxism at university, didn't recognise any of that rhetoric as Marxist, and that Tucker Carlson is jumping to crazy right-wing nutjob conclusions. No, John. We know the game you're playing. Character assassination of a conservative right-winger because you can't debate the issues themselves. Pathetic. There's one left-wing American talk show host left that I can still stand to watch, and that's Bill Maher. At least Maher is often very funny, and he's old-school left. He detests woke culture and identity politics, and the self-obsession of the modern Westerner. Have a listen to this from Maher's show this week, and maybe replace the word America for Australia.
You're not going to win the battle for the 21st century if you are a silly people, and Americans are a silly people. That's the classic phrase from Lawrence of Arabia when Lawrence tells his Bedouin allies that as long as they stay a bunch of squabbling tribes, they will remain a silly people. Well, we're the silly people now. Do you know who doesn't care that there's a stereotype of a Chinese man in a Dr. Seuss book? China. All 1.4 billion of them could give a crouching tiger flying because they're not a silly people. If anything, they are as serious as a prison fight. Look, we all know China does bad stuff. They break promises about Hong Kong autonomy, they put Uyghurs in camps and punish dissent, and we don't want to be that. But it's got to be something between authoritarian government that tells everyone what to do and a representative government that can't do anything at all. In 2 generations, China has built 500 entire cities from scratch, moved the majority of their huge population from poverty to the middle class, and mostly cornered the market in 5G and pharmaceuticals. Oh, and they bought Africa. Their new Silk Road initiative is the biggest infrastructure project in history, indebting not just that continent, but large parts of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East to the people who built their roads, bridges, and ports. In China alone, they have 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. America has none. Our fastest train is the tram that goes around the zoo. On a national level, we've been having Infrastructure Week every week since 2009, but we never do anything. Half the country is having a never-ending woke competition deciding whether Mr. Potato Head has a dick. And the other half believes we have to stop the lizard people because they're eating babies. We are a silly people. Even when we all agree on something, like getting rid of the penny. No, The inertia, the ass covering, the graft, the lawyers, the cowardice. Nothing ever moves in this impacted colon of a country. We see a problem and we ignore it, lie about it, fight about it, endlessly litigate it, sunset clause it, kick it down the road, and then write a bill where a half-assed solution doesn't kick in for 10 years. China sees a problem and they fix it. They build a dam. We debate what to rename it. That's why their airports look like this and ours look like this. In San Francisco, it took 10 years just to get 2 bus lines through environmental review. The Big Dig, a tunnel in Boston, took 16 years. China once put up a 57-story skyscraper in 19 days. They demolished and rebuilt the San Yuan Bridge in Beijing in 43 hours. We binge watch, they binge build. When COVID hit Wuhan, the city built a quarantine center with 4,000 rooms in 10 days, and they barely had to use it because they quickly arrested the spread of the disease. They were back to throwing raves in swimming pools, while we were stuck at home surfing the dark web for black market Charmin. We're not losing to China. We lost. The returns just haven't all come in yet. They made robots that check a kid's temperature and got their asses back in school. Most of our kids are still pretending to take Zoom classes while they watch TikTok and their brain cells slowly commit ritual suicide. As George Bush once said, is our children learning? There's a progressive trend now to sacrifice merit for equity. Colleges are chucking the SAT and ACT test, and in New York, Mayor de Blasio announced merit would no longer decide who gets into the schools for advanced learners, but rather a lottery system. You think China's doing that, letting political correctness get in the way of nurturing their best and brightest? You think Chinese colleges are offering courses in the philosophy of Star Trek, the sociology of Seinfeld, and surviving the coming zombie apocalypse? Those are real, and so is China, and they are eating our lunch.
There's still a few sane people on the left, and Bill Maher is one of them. I guess they'll cancel him soon. One of the most disturbing stories of 2021, especially for the integrity of our nation's legal system and the rights of men in particular, was the assassination of the career of Federal Attorney General Christian Porter by the forces of the left. We covered the story as it broke back in March. There's some very serious stuff going on in our country right now that could set extremely dangerous precedents in our legal system that would overturn centuries-old legal principles such as due process, rules of evidence, and the presumption of innocence. It all centers around 33-year-old rape allegations against this country's highest law officer, our Attorney General, Christian Porter, an elected member of Parliament and of Scott Morrison's cabinet. A letter was sent to a number of Green and Labor politicians, as well as to Scott Morrison, from an anonymous source claiming that in 1988, Porter raped a woman who was destined for greatness in her political career, and that this trauma led her to a life of mental illness and ultimately suicide mid-last year. If true, it's a horrible story. But that's the problem. Is it true?
So I just wanted to start by saying something to the parents who are grieving for the loss of their adult daughter. I only knew your daughter for the briefest periods at debating competitions when we were teenagers about 33 years ago. I was 17 years old and I think that she was 16 years old. And in losing that person, your daughter, you've suffered a terrible loss. And you did not deserve the frenzied politicisation of the circumstances of your daughter's death of the past week. And I have thought long and hard about the implications for you of what I feel that I need to say today. And I hope that whatever else happens from this point, that you will understand that in saying today that the things that are being claimed to have happened did not happen, that I do not mean to impose anything more upon your grief. But I hope that you will also understand that because what is being alleged did not happen, I must say so publicly.
The letter said that the parents of the woman didn't support her pursuit of the rape allegations. They worried that she may have confected or embellished the allegations due to her mental illness, it said. The letter also said that friends of the woman disagreed with the parents. The woman herself, however, contacted New South Wales police hours before her death, saying she didn't want the investigation continued. This is troubling because it looks far more like politically motivated attack than a genuine claim of rape. And there's now maybe some tit-for-tat going on. Liberal Senator Sarah Henderson this week told the Senate that she received an email about an historical rape allegation involving a senior Labor MP. This second case was investigated by police, and there was found to be no case to answer. Back in 2014, Labor leader Bill Shorten then broke his silence about rape allegations against him dating back to the 1980s, after Victorian police told him there was no case and no charges to be laid. Shorten revealed he was the senior Labor figure in those allegations, saying there is absolutely no basis to the claims. So does this and the recent Brittany Higgins case mean, as the ABC keeps suggesting, that there is a systemic problem of sexual assault in our political culture? I do not think so. But we do have a trend in this country of politicisation of sexual assault and trial by media when it comes to sexual assault cases involving accusations against public figures. It does seem that there are some troubling spot incidents happening in Canberra. Now, maybe it's because they fly in from all over the country for several weeks a year and they're all working and partying around the clock while there. The problem, if you ask me, isn't the sexual culture. It's the excessive boozing. Most of this could be fixed, if they really wanted to, by banning booze from the house and requiring people working during parliamentary sitting periods to be breathalyzed before work every day. I mean, it happens to people who have to steer vehicles at work. Why can't it happen to the people who are supposed to be steering the whole country? Not hitting the bottle at the taxpayer's expense every day. Now, I'm talking about sexual harassment there, and there's a tendency for that to occur perhaps a little too much within Parliament House at Canberra. But let's get back to the more hideous crime of rape. As a dad of two daughters, I can tell all you virtue-signalling third-wave uber feminists that there is something you do not understand about fathers. You slammed ScoMo for saying he shouldn't need to be told by his wife to think about his daughters when dealing with a rape allegation against one of his staff. He should know rape is bad. Yes, true, he should. But I think he does. I think 99.999% of men know rape is bad. ScoMo's comment was cringy, goofy, and his point was maybe badly made. But the reason the wokerati don't understand what he was trying to say is maybe because you're not fathers. So let me mansplain something to you for a moment. There are two genders, or at least there are two main genders. They are equal, but they are different. And through thousands of years of history, there have been certain roles that women played and certain roles that men have played traditionally. That doesn't mean they have to be bound by those roles today. But thousands of years of evolution and convention doesn't just magically disappear because it upsets your 25-year-old gender studies lecturer at uni in the 21st century. So let me tell you about the fathers of girls. You know how mothers can lift a car off their child in a moment of protection and super strength? They begin nesting automatically before birth. They can sense when their baby's in distress, even if asleep. All that maternal instinct stuff. Well, fathers have some pretty deep instinctual stuff going on too. We're protectors, and the instinct of fathers of rape victims is to want to kill the offender. There's probably a biological God-given reason for that. It's visceral and deep and not something I can explain the intensity of to someone who's not a father of girls. And I think that is what ScoMo was trying to allude to, I think. But heaven forbid men should have any good traits. That'd be That'd just be toxic masculinity to you lot, wouldn't it? Now, with all the woke humans screaming for new laws and inquiries and more government intervention in how people interact, think and speak, you could be forgiven for not knowing that rape is already a serious crime in Australia. In the state of Victoria, as an example, around 45 people each year are convicted of rape, and except in very rare and unusual cases, all of them go to jail. The average sentence time is around 9 years, and they're doing the time. The average non-parole period is 6 years, and most do more than that. Since 2018, judges in Victoria are forced to consider the statutory standard sentence when sentencing rapists to prison, which in the case of rape in that state is set at 10 years now. In Queensland, the maximum sentence for rape is life. Now, I think all that's a bit lenient because I'm a dad, and yes, that does make a difference. No apology for that. I think a proven case of premeditated, fully intentional rape should cop a penalty of at least 20 years to life. But our legal system isn't based on emotional reactions. Rape is a Category 1 offence, which means we need to be damn sure the accused is guilty before convicting and punishing them. And this is where it gets hard. It's a tough crime to prove. But unfortunately, that does not mean that we get to throw all our legal principles out the door in place of mob rule. We used to have a thing in Australia called the presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial. We also used to have a thing called proving a crime beyond reasonable doubt, based on the principle that it's better 100 guilty people go free than one innocent person is wrongly convicted. Pop author and Four Corners queen bee of witch hunts against men, Louise Milligan, and her ABC mates don't seem to give a rat's about those crucial legal principles. Their pathetically childish moral outrage and arrogance leads them to shout down anyone who suggests that the due process of law should be followed. If you dare to say, hey, look, I'm no fan of Cardinal Pell, but is it possible, maybe, just maybe, that he couldn't have done all of that in just a few minutes? Well, you must be some kind of wicked defender of child sexual abuse. This is a bloody dangerous state of affairs, and it explains why the woke mob are so dangerous. So let's review Milligan's big story this week. It says that the letter was forwarded to the Federal Police Commissioner Reece Kershaw by Labor's leader in the Senate, Penny Wong, and Greens Senator Hanson Young, who were also recipients of the letter. Last year, New South Wales Police Force set up Strike Force Windara after the woman reported in Sydney in February 2020 to detectives from the New South Wales Police Child Abuse and Sex Crime Squad that she had been raped by the man in 1988. The woman had engaged a lawyer and told many friends about the allegation, but she sadly took her own life in June last year, so the strike force never got going. Friends of the woman, who had years earlier been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, say her mental health deteriorated in the weeks before she took her life. She had made previous suicide attempts. Okay, it's a tragic story, and it'd be nice to be able to blame someone for all the pain and suffering that this poor woman obviously went through. But, as the evil Conservative commentator Andrew Bolt wrote in the Herald Sun and Daily Telegraph this week, quote, "We're talking about an alleged rape 33 years ago, with police notified only last year. We're also talking about a woman who battled severe mental issues and is no longer alive to be questioned about her claims. And we're talking now about a complaint sent anonymously to natural enemies of the Morrison government: Labor, the Greens, Milligan, and Malcolm Turnbull. He also got sent a letter. Again, I say it's all horrible. But like the rape claims against Shorten, they have to be ignored if they can't be proved. Rape is a serious offence with huge penalties. We cannot throw out due legal process just because we'd like to. And we can't destroy men's reputations without good evidence, especially when they work in politics and have plenty of natural enemies who might want to lie about them. Does Louise Milligan need her husband to remind her to imagine if one of her sons was falsely accused of a rape or crime they didn't commit? Surely she shouldn't need prompting from her spouse to be reminded of the importance of due legal process. As if all this isn't bad enough, Enter Malcolm Turnbull. Imagine being so politically maligned and bitter that you'd take a tragic story like this and make a veiled suggestion that the woman involved had not committed suicide, but had in fact been murdered to shut her up. You know, House of Cards style. That was the clear and bizarre implication to anyone with half a brain of Malcolm Turnbull's comments in an interview with the ABC radio this week. What an extraordinary claim for anyone to make, let alone a former Prime Minister of our country. If that alone is found out to be false, Turnbull should suffer the highest public condemnation for his comments, and he should most certainly be turfed from the Liberal Party. As Paul Kelly from the Australian newspaper put it in an editorial, this is trial by media and public opinion, dressed up as public interest. As I mentioned earlier, the other side will be sadly leaving the Discernible platform at the end of 2021, hopefully returning somewhere in 2022 after the election on our own platforms, in which I'll be now running in the federal election, of course, as a Liberal Democrats candidate for the seat of Ryan in Brisbane. And I'm running to win because we have to bring real experience from outside of the political inner circle of Canberra elites to save this country. During the election campaign, I'll be posting lots of random short videos and commenting on stuff. So right now, if you'd please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TheOtherSideOz and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, or just search us up. Then be sure to click follow on Twitter to follow us and like on the Facebook page. The Facebook page looks like this. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible. Matt's still going to be producing some great stuff on both YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible, it isn't actually The Other Side anymore. So we do need you to go onto our own separate page. So you've got to find those pages. Be sure to stay in touch with me throughout 2022. It's going to be a lot of fun. During the campaign, I'll be posting behind the scenes stuff so you can see what a campaign is like. And then if you could kindly subscribe to us on YouTube, our YouTube page looks like this one. And again, you need to find our page, not our folder on the Discernible page. You've got to find the Other Side Australia page and subscribe directly to that and click the bell so you get notified when we put up new content. I really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022. And don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have links sent to your phone when I upload new content. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost@gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. A couple of weeks later, news broke of some disgusting antics by some staffers in Parliament House, forcing the Prime Minister to make a statement about the awful culture in the building. The fact the PM has more important things to worry about was kind of lost on the ABC and the mainstream media, who continue to serve their role as the PR arm of the Labor Party and all things identity politics, attempting to paint Scott Morrison as the cause of this revolting behaviour and a culture of systemic sexism all through our nation. Nope, not buying that narrative, Ita. Sorry. It is the media's job to hold politicians' feet to the fire and to act as the fourth estate and keep them honest. But their first job is just to report the damn news and try to be fair, not to go on personal biased witch hunts like this one from the ABC's Laura Tingle on the 7:30 report.
Now forgive me the indulgence. Forgive me this indulgence. I want women to have at least the same opportunities and the same voice and the same safety as men in this country.
Actually, Prime Minister, the women of Australia may not forgive you this indulgence. Those women may be wondering what exactly the Prime Minister has been doing for the past month and what sick culture has been allowed to develop within the government and within Parliament House under his watch as Prime Minister since 2018.
Laura, whatever your name is, here's a wake-up call for you. Scott Morrison is not in his job to run your little offices at Parliament House. It's his job to run Australia. Slightly more important, don't you think? Parliament House is being badly run, and he's overseeing the fix of it, albeit a bit late.
Let's recap what we have learned since that day a month ago when the story first broke that a young woman had allegedly been raped in Parliament House exactly 2 years ago today.
Oh yes, let's recap, shall we?
We have learned that the story of what happened in the wake of the alleged assault, starting with the sacking of the alleged perpetrator for a security breach, has been seriously and repeatedly challenged.
Oh no. Wow. You mean there wasn't just one narrative about the Higgins rape allegation? You mean that people actually had different recollections and approaches and opinions about the handling of something like that? How outrageous. How unexpected. Scott Morrison should be sacked immediately. Next.
We have learned of historical rape allegations involving the country's first law officer.
Ooh, sounds terrible. But she forgot to mention the allegations are 33 years old, came from a woman suffering mental illness and have been vehemently denied by the accused. But yeah, details.
We have learned of a culture in Parliament House where building staff understand that they are not to make it their business when they find a naked, intoxicated young woman in an office, once they have established she is still breathing.
Yeah, we probably do need an investigation into that one, but it's hardly a reason to criticise the Prime Minister of the country. It requires a review of the security code and training at Parliament House by whoever the idiot is who's running Parliament House at the moment and who should probably be sacked. Although, if the security had intervened, I'm sure the ABC would find a way to spin that as being a violation of Brittany's privacy or something.
The list of walking wounded in Scott Morrison's ministry is staggering. In different ways, the actions of Christian Porter, Peter Dutton, Linda Reynolds, Alan Tudge, Michaelia Cash, Stuart Robert and Michael Sukkar have all been brought into question.
In your humble opinion, Laura, whatever your name is. And this is where I have a big problem with this kind of editorial approach to the news appearing on the nationally taxpayer-funded broadcaster. This is in what we call in journalism a hatchet job, a construct. It's full of circular logic and innuendo, personal interpretations, opinions, linking a whole bunch of sound bites together and questionable allegations together to apply some kind of systemic underlying problem, which is a bit of a stretch to say the least. It has no place on a taxpayer-funded national broadcaster. If Lala wants to express her personal opinions and theories, she can do so like the rest of us and pay for it herself or work for a privately funded media organisation, but not on your tax dime. Prime Minister, you cannot win with these people. The only way to fix this is by recognising that loud identity politics left do not represent all of Australia. Your 2019 victory should have shown you this. It's time for radical reform of the ABC and our woke education system. Make no mistake, this is an existential issue for your Prime Ministership, the coalition government, and maybe the country's future as a liberal nation. And a little respect for the Australian public and their choice of leadership from the ABC would be nice too. We didn't vote for the Liberal Party because we care about the sexual antics of children's staffers at Parliament House. We voted for them because of their free market liberal ideology and the way they run the economy and the government. But don't bother focusing on that or anything. That's real news. Literal tossers in Parliament House behaving like the worst kind of 14-year-old schoolboys doesn't make it easy for those of us fighting the rampant misandry and man-hating culture in Australia. Just put Mr. Happy back in your stupid pants and grow up, and get the hell out of our Parliament House and political machine while you're at it. I think we need to hire people over 40 to be advisors to our MPs and ministers from now on. This show doesn't approve of any kind of racism or sexism. Any criticism I have of modern anti-racists and feminists is criticism of their Marxist critical theory approach, commonly known as wokeism, and the idea that the solution for all sexism and racism needs to come from the state or the government or more rules and regulations. There is racism in our society and it needs to stop. Some of the attacks on Asian people I've heard about lately are not pretty. There was a case in Brisbane of an Aussie Chinese mother whose daughter was spat on at an Aldi supermarket because the pig who committed that assault had in his tiny, tiny brain some kind of connection between COVID and Asian people. Duh. Flus come from everywhere. SARS-1 started in Canada. One of the worst flus in Hong Kong when I lived there was called Sydney Influenza A. We named them according to where they start. And even, as I believe, the Chinese government's communist nonsense is somehow responsible for the flu getting out of that lab in Wuhan, and it didn't come from the animal kingdom, as the pathetic WHO investigation found, to attack Chinese people in Australia because of that is idiotic. To attack Asian people generally is both idiotic and ignorant. Thank God most Aussies, the vast majority, are not racist. So don't worry, I haven't become all woke, and I'm not about to suggest we have a systemic racism problem and need big government intervention. But racists do exist, and they just need to grow up and shut up. Which brings me to men who think it's okay to sexually assault or harass women. Almost every woman in this country seems to have a claim of sexual harassment at work. What's going on? Even if some of these claims are some kind of virtue signalling or attention seeking or faux outrage by the brainwashed woke kids, there's plenty of real ones to be concerned about. So who are the blokes doing this stuff? It's pretty simple. You don't touch women at work, and you don't speak to them of sexual matters at work, and you keep your flirting out of the office. And if you do like someone at work, and I know it's where a lot of people meet their significant other, then when you're at a social gathering together, politely ask them out. And if they say no, fall over yourself to make sure you be extra nice to them at work on work matters, and do not take it out of them in any way or make them feel even slightly uncomfortable, especially if you're in a position of authority over them. Why is this bleedingly obvious stuff so damn hard for some people to understand? Now again, I say, most Aussie men are not sexual harassers or abusers. So don't worry, I haven't gone all woke, and I'm not about, again, to suggest that we have a systemic sexism problem and need big government to intervene. But the few men who do this stuff need to grow up and stop it. We can't fight the rise of this man-hating wokeism and misandry that's rife in this country, while you 0.1% of men keep behaving like you haven't yet evolved from apes. The public service and our politicians are a machine that will always seek to grow itself, unless we push on them from the outside not to grow and spend and create debt, and to just leave us alone, leave the private sector, the economy, and we the people to our own devices. People who like to control things for a living, though, will always take more control and power if we give it to them. It doesn't seem to matter which party's in power. Government feeds government. And it's up to us, the people, to fight for our freedom every single day. The game is rigged. Ultimately, we probably can't win, but we must delay the horrible inevitable. So, they make rules and laws, and then they increase their own budgets and staffing levels, and then they make even more rules and laws, and then they increase their own budgets and staffing levels, and they make even more rules and laws, and on it goes, until you pretty soon can't walk down the street or buy a certain drink at a certain bar after 11 p.m. You can't do this, you can't do that. You've got to hand over your license to go into a bar in Brisbane. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And now they're coming for the most intimate parts of our lives and our most sacred freedoms. Like Mick Fuller, the New South Wales Police Commissioner, and his sexual consent app. Former Labor leader Mark Latham summed up the stupidity of it all on the Bolt Report on Sky News.
Someone like myself, married for 20 years, to make love to your partner, you've got to stop at the moment of foreplay and say, hang on, what? I've got to log into my app here. Talk about a mood breaker. Talk about driving down the birth rate with that particular manoeuvre. And you're into your app, and then you're supposed to resurrect where you're at. Now, this is the wackiest, zaniest intrusion of government power. And to make it worse, Mick Fuller has said all this data would be held by a private company. So great news for the Chinese, I suppose. Great news for the extortion industry as well.
Oh, mate, Andrew, I didn't even know that detail. That's bizarre.
Yeah,
private
company. Yeah, holds the data. So how good is that?
How good are consent apps? Have the people who come up with these ideas even read George Orwell's 1984? At least Commissioner Fuller admitted himself that it was perhaps the dumbest idea he'd ever had upon reflection. Also in episode 25 in March, I put my PR consultant hat on. I worked 13 years in broadcast journalism and then 22 years in PR. I'm tired. And I dissected the PR messaging tactics of Dan Andrews. Dan has many more than just 17 PR guys. You know, things are moving so fast with the COVID decisions and lockdowns and unlockdowns and border restrictions that I think it's important we stop and reflect now and again and do a bit of a reality check. I want to take you back to Friday, the 12th of February, when Victorian Premier Dan Andrews announced in Melbourne that he was going to lock down the entire state of Victoria for 5 days because of a cluster of just 19 COVID cases. Remember, a case just means someone has tested positive for COVID, not that they necessarily are experiencing any symptoms, let alone in hospital or intensive care even. All of these cases were connected to a quarantine case at the Holiday Inn Hotel at Melbourne Airport, which was first identified on February the 4th. On Friday the 12th morning, all of Melbourne was waiting to hear whether the Premier was going to go into a full lockdown. The Australian Open was underway, and florists and restaurants, battered by the state's 2020 lockdowns, were wondering whether tens of millions of dollars worth of fresh fruit and flowers would have to be wasted ahead of the Valentine's Day and Chinese New Year weekend, simply tossed out along with their best hope of business recovery. And they waited. And they waited. Until finally, at 1 p.m, the Emperor appeared. In some ways, Dan Andrews is a master communicator. He's good at acting the role of the ordinary, reasonable Aussie bloke. He knows how to sound and look reasonable. He also knows how to frame things to make them sound very fair and sensible. The problem is that he manipulates reality. Now, some might call this lying, in order to frame things in a way that gets the outcome he wants. That's why it's so important that we back up and reflect every now and again, and that those of us who don't live in Victoria understand what is going on in our country.
Victorians will be well familiar with the term UK strain, UK variant of concern. We have talked about this for a long time because it is so hyper-infectious and moves so fast that it is presenting a very, very real challenge to our status, our stay safe, stay open, our precious thing that we've built, all of us, throughout 2020. Now, whilst we don't have cases outside those that were notified as possible close contacts, those who had been by virtue of who they'd been with or where they had been, whilst it's not surprising that we're seeing extra cases within those groups, and in some respects it's pleasing that that's where those cases are, the way in which they are presenting is a very significant concern to us. If I can just give you a couple of examples, I'll make the point this way. We are having cases test positive, and we, in rapid time, we get notified of that positive test result. By the time we find that case as positive, they've already infected their close contacts, their family, people they live with, people they've spent time with. That makes it incredibly difficult to do contact tracing, because there is no gap, if you like, between when we have the first case and their close contacts and potentially others that they have spent time with. The whole process, because of the hyper-infectivity and the speed at which this UK variant moves, the whole process has been condensed down, and it is now, I am sad to have to report, it is the advice to me that we must assume that there are further cases in the community than we have positive results for, and that it is moving at a velocity that has not been seen anywhere in our country.
Now that is a good, scary setup if you're about to tell your state that they have to lock down. If they can't contact trace faster than infection spreads, and it's moving at this incredible velocity, and there are possibly heaps more people already infected, well, we better shut down. The only problem is, it wasn't based on facts or science. Janet Albrechtsen wrote in The Australian that the politics of fear has no room for facts that allay fears. According to Public Health England, people who know what they're talking about on this, a person with the original Wuhan strain of COVID is likely to pass it to 11% of the people they come in contact with. A person with the UK strain will pass it on to 14.7% of the people they come in contact with. So the hyper-infectivity framing used by Andrews to justify his short, sharp lockdown was simply misleading. But just in case they were still not scared enough to accept the lockdown yet, Dan had this warning to terrify Victorians into compliance.
The challenge that I have, and the challenge that all of us will have to confront, is that if we wait for this theory that it might be out there, there might be more cases than we know about, if we wait for that to be proven correct, it will be too late. And then we will face the prospect of being locked down until a vaccination is rolled out. A vaccine is rolled out to vulnerable people, to a very large number of Victorians, a significant percentage of the Victorian community. That's months. That's not days or weeks, that's months.
So now are you ready? Who wants to have to be locked down for months? Never mind that it's highly debatable whether that would be necessary or even effective. Dan now has his audience emotionally right where he needs them, to accept the big announcement as reasonable and necessary. And so now he lets the bombshell drop. Take it away, Laurence Olivier.
So, because This is so infectious and is moving so fast. We need a circuit breaker. Therefore, I'm announcing, on advice from the Chief Health Officer and after a meeting of relevant Cabinet committees and the full Cabinet, that from 11:59 p.m. tonight, Victoria, all of Victoria, will go to stage 4.
Stage 4 is very serious liberty-destroying stuff.
There will only be 4 reasons to leave your home: shopping for necessary goods and services, when you need those things, and only what you need. Victorians are well acquainted with this. We've done this before. Victorians know what to do, and they know that these tactics, this type of response works. But I will, just for completeness sake, take you through the list as it stands now. Then I'm going to ask Brett to speak to the hyper-infectivity and the speed with which this UK variant is moving. Shopping for what you need when you need it.
Let's stop it there. We are all becoming way too used to politicians telling us when we can and cannot go outside our own homes, when we can go to work, feed our kids, go shopping, exercise, or travel beyond 5 kilometres. We are failing to appreciate the seriousness of this kind of restriction of fundamental rights. Why? Because we've become so used to it. This is stuff that should only ever be done in the most extreme of national crises. Not when you have a handful of people testing positive to a virus that only 1 in every 700 people under the age of 65 who get it worldwide dies. He shut down the entire state. Why? Why should anyone in country Victoria have to be deprived of their fundamental liberty? And what right does a 2-bit state leader and a gang of bureaucrats in Melbourne have to decree all of that? Even the lockdown of all of Melbourne was in no way proportional to the threat. The hyper-lightspeed nature of the UK strain was a lie. But still, Victorians think Dan is doing a good job. Still, they buy the spin and the manipulation. Victoria, when are you going to understand how you're being played here? It's like you're that friend in a dysfunctional relationship that just can't see how they're being manipulated. Oh, but he loves me. He let me go outside today. Mr. Reasonable is telling porkies. But why is he doing all this? Well, Peter Credlin had this analysis on Sky News.
Millions of people's plans shattered, thousands of businesses massively out of pocket because Daniel Andrews panicked that he'd be out of a job if his rickety contact tracing turned out to be as dodgy and as inept as his hotel quarantine.
Credlin also questioned why the Prime Minister seems to love Dan so very much, and why a compensation package for Victorian business has been so slow in coming from the state government.
He sits there drawing a full salary, yet nothing yet on compensation. Nothing. He can lock down the state in a heartbeat, can't he? But a compensation package, well, says this clown today, that he can't rush. Honestly, this government should be gone. It should have resigned in shame, and Victoria's governor should be sending us all to the polls. But because of a weak public service, a still largely fawning media in Victoria, a muzzled opposition and an intimidated Labor caucus who can pick up the phone to me, but they can't roll this bloke that they need to, Andrews is still in charge. From the Prime Minister down, people seem overawed by this bloke's bullying arrogance. As for the Victorian public, well, I reckon they're no longer fooled, no matter how often Daniel Andrews tells us how good he is. Well, Fig Jam Dan, you are a joke.
That was Peter Credlin on Sky News back on February 17. Now, while Dan is a master of playing the reasonable guy and spinning the lie that the February 12 lockdown was so necessary, it's important we look back also at his performance at a press conference on February 16. The reasonable guy becomes very unreasonable very quickly should anyone dare to question him. I've said before on this show that the Victorian political press gallery are the weakest I've ever seen in terms of holding a leader to account, with a few notable exceptions like the Australian's Rachel Baxendale. But it took a national journalist like the ABC's 7:30 report host Lee Sales, to show the state press gallery kids how the job is actually done. Many Aussies outside Victoria have probably not seen a lot of this exchange, but I think it's important that you do.
Premier, what do you say today to Victorians who, after 111 days of lockdown last year, might be asking, how is it the case that their government still lacks such confidence in your hotel quarantine systems and your contact tracing that you apparently can't manage 2 to 3 cases of COVID a day in a population of about 6.3 million people?
Well, you've made a number of assertions there. And
well, they're all facts, actually.
Well, no, they're not. You've just put it to me that there's a lack of confidence. Absolutely. I'm more than confident in the team we have and in the Victorian community that they can get through this. So with the greatest of respect, you have put a number of things to me that are not accurate.
But the data, Premier, that we were just provided with showed that they were contacts of contacts. They were really well identified. And
well, not all of them, actually. Some of them have come into scope.
They've been well identified and pinned down. Your hospitals aren't in any danger of being overwhelmed. It's a small number of cases. That all suggests that your system is actually working pretty well to contain it. So why the need for lockdown?
Well, that's a very different question to the one that you asked at the beginning, where you contended that there were all sorts of confidence issues.
So are you going to put the state into a 5-day lockdown every time you have 2 or 3 new cases a day?
We'll look at every positive case on its merits.
We'll look at every positive case on its merits. What does that even mean? Is he saying that he'll make it up as he goes along? Can't there be at least some clear guidelines that the community can debate and agree upon in advance, so we have some benchmarks, so businesses and people can manage their lives and plan just a little bit and know what to expect? This is the 2nd year of this pandemic. You don't get to just say, oh, we'll have to wait and see anymore. 6.5 million people can't wait upon your day-to-day judgment, Your Majesty. Would these politicians and bureaucrats act any differently if we tied their livelihoods to lockdowns?
If snap lockdowns are going to continue to be a tool or an option for a small number of cases, how can Victorian businesses make any regular planning, let alone investment planning?
Well, again, I'm not accepting, and I think it's just wrong to say that they're a tool for a small number of cases as such.
You used the term small number of cases before yourself.
But they're a tool, yeah, and also I think about 14 times made the point, Lee, that every case on its merits. So I think we sort of get... Anyway, I'm putting it to you that we will always reserve the right to look at individual cases and to follow the advice that is given to us. And I just don't think you wouldn't want it any other way. Because the notion, let's just go back to first principles here. If I'm, would you really want me to be shopping around for the best advice? The most politically popular advice?
No,
would you really want me to say, oh, well, gee, that'll be incredibly hard? And I'm not doubting that for a moment, how hard it is. I'm not prepared to do that.
Not at all, Premier. I'm just, what I'm trying to get to is, it obviously, as you would agree, lockdowns impose a real cost on the community. Victorians have already paid a really high price because of the long lockdown last year. Your own team just made it clear that the cases are actually very well traced, managed and contained.
Yes.
So why have you needed to resort to the harsh measure of a lockdown?
The types of cases, this UK strain, the fact that despite the amazing efforts of all of our contact tracers and testers and path lab workers and the work of so many genuine hard-working Victorians, we had a situation where at the same time as we're becoming aware of the primary case, they've already infected their close contacts. That's not something we've seen before. The speed at which this has moved saw our public health team make the very difficult decisions based on the best of science and the best understanding you can possibly have of any outbreak, that this was a difficult but a proportionate and necessary thing to do.
Except it wasn't. The aftermath has borne that out. They only found another 5 positives linked to the Holiday Inn strain. So what happened to the hyper-infectious strain moving at incredible velocity? It didn't eventuate, because it was all a massive lie. If we get another poll, like the February 4 Roy Morgan survey that showed 60% of Victorians want the state of emergency to continue through to December, or their November poll that put Andrew's approval rating at up 12% to 71%, then my faith in Victorians, which was high once, will now be shattered. Stop letting your government play you like a fiddle. And that was from episode 25 of The Other Side from back in March, bringing us to the end of the second of our summer series episodes and episode 79 of The Other Side Australia. We'll see you next week for our final episode for 2021 and for a while, episode 80. As I mentioned earlier, The Other Side will be sadly leaving the Discernible platform at the end of 2021, hopefully returning somewhere in 2022 after the election on our own platforms, in which I'll be now running in the federal election, of course, as a Liberal Democrats candidate for the seat of Ryan in Brisbane. And I'm running to win because we have to bring real experience from outside of the political inner circle of Canberra elites to save this country. During the election campaign, I'll be posting lots of random short videos and commenting on stuff. So right now, if you'd please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at The Other Side Oz, and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, or just search us up. Then be sure to click follow on Twitter to follow us and like on the Facebook page. The Facebook page looks like this. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible. Matt's still going to be producing some great stuff on both YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible, it isn't actually The Other Side anymore. So we do need you to go onto our own separate page. So you've got to find those pages. Be sure to stay in touch with me throughout 2022. It's going to be a lot of fun. During the campaign, I'll be posting behind the scenes stuff so you can see what a campaign is like. And then if you could kindly subscribe to us on YouTube, our YouTube page looks like this one. And again, you need to find our page, not our folder on the Discernible page. You've got to find the Other Side Australia page and subscribe directly to that and click the bell so you get notified when we put up new content. I really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022. And don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have links sent to your phone when I upload new content. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost@gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. Written and authorised by Damian Coory from Toowong, Queensland.